The stagecoach rocked and groaned as it rolled westward, wheels sinking deep into the rutted track that cut through endless miles of pale prairie. Clara Bennett pressed her gloved hand against the windowpane, watching the horizon blur into a gray-blue haze. The sky was white and cold, the kind that made her feel small enough to vanish. Wind tugged at the edges of the coach's worn leather covering, whistling through cracks that led in both dust and doubt. She had been traveling for 12 days. 12 long days of jolts, sleepless nights, and half-whispered prayers that she had not made a mistake coming this far. Every mile had pulled her farther from Missouri, from the memory of the small clapboard house her father had built, now sold off to pay the banker, from the fields that had turned to weeds after the fever took him. She had no family left, no savings, no place to return to. Only a letter and a promise written in a careful hand: I seek a good, honest woman to share my life on my ranch near Laramie. Work will be hard, but there will be security and respect. Eli Turner. His name had sounded kind in his letters. His words had been plain, without poetry, but there had been something steady in them. A man who means what he writes, Clara had told herself as she packed the only dress she had fit to travel in. Now, as the coach jolted over another rut, she clutched that letter in her lap. The edges were creased soft from being read too many times. Her stomach knotted with both hope and fear. He'll like me, she told herself. He must. He asked for a woman of character, and I've worked hard all my life. The driver's shout cut through her thoughts. Holt Junction ahead. She peered out the window and saw the faint outline of a settlement taking shape in the dust. A line of wooden buildings huddled along a single street, a saloon, a general store, a livery, and beyond them a small church. The place looked as if it had been carved out of stubborn ground, too proud to yield. The coach came to a halt in front of the general store. The driver swung down and opened the door. Holt Junction, miss. This is your stop. Clara stepped down carefully, boots sinking slightly into the damp dirt. The air smelled of rain and horses. She stood still for a moment, adjusting her bonnet, the ribbon trembling in the wind. Her heart was hammering. She expected to see him there waiting, maybe holding his hat in his hands, maybe even smiling. But the street was nearly empty. A pair of ranch hands leaned against the hitching post outside the saloon, squinting at her. A woman with a baby crossed to the mercantile, casting a brief glance before looking away. Clara's throat went dry. Then a voice called out, "Miss Bennett." She turned. A man stood a few yards away, tall, with sandy hair and a neatly trimmed mustache. His coat looked newer than the others she'd seen, his boots polished, his eyes quick and assessing. "Yes," she said, forcing a smile. "Mr. Turner." He gave a stiff nod. "That's right." She took a step closer. "I'm glad to finally meet you. The journey was long, but..." He raised a hand, cutting her off with a small frown. "You came alone." "Yes. My escort couldn't afford to travel this far west." He looked her up and down. The plain blue calico dress, the scuffed shoes, the satchel worn soft with years of use. His lips pressed into a thin line. "You look younger than I expected." "I'm 23, she said quietly. He didn't sound impressed. "You look like you've seen better meals." Clara stiffened, embarrassment flushing her cheeks. "Times have been hard back home. I'll gain it back once I start working again." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "I ain't looking for someone who hopes to be strong. I need someone who already is. Winters here are cruel. Takes more than letters and good manners to survive them. I can work, Mr. Turner," she said quickly. "I can cook, mend, plow if I must. I didn't come here to sit idle." He sighed and motioned toward the saloon. "Let's talk inside. No sense in freezing out here." She followed him through the swinging doors, blinking as her eyes adjusted to the dim light. The smell of tobacco and stale whiskey filled the air. A few men turned to stare before going back to their drinks. Eli led her to a small table near the back. He ordered coffee for himself but didn't ask if she wanted any. When he sat, she did the same, folding her hands tightly to keep them from trembling. "You wrote that you had a bit of money saved," he said. "Yes, enough for travel, and a little extra. So you're not expecting me to feed another mouth without help?" Clara hesitated, then shook her head. "I only expect to earn my place." He leaned back, studying her with a look that made her feel more like a piece of stock than a woman. "You seem polite enough, but you don't look hearty. You'll need to handle the ranch alone when I'm out working. I don't see that in you." "I've been alone before," she said softly. "And I managed." "Managed ain't the same as thriven." He rubbed his chin. "I thought I wanted someone like you, quiet, proper. But maybe I need someone with more grit. The words sliced through her. You're saying you don't want me? He met her eyes for a moment before looking away. That's what I'm saying. Sorry if that sounds cruel, but it's better now than later. I'll pay for your room at the boarding house until the next coach comes through. Clara felt her throat close. The noise of the saloon faded around her. You wrote that you wanted a wife who'd stand by you. I did, he said. But not one I'd have to carry. Her fingers tightened around her satchel. You don't even know me. He stood, tossing a coin on the table. I've seen enough. For a moment, she couldn't move. The humiliation was heavy and hot, rising up her neck until she felt she might choke on it. She had crossed plains and mountains for this, for rejection dressed up as practicality. He was halfway to the door when another figure stepped through it. The man who entered was taller than Eli by a head, broad-shouldered, the kind of presence that filled a room without trying. His duster was dust-stained, his hat low, and his eyes, gray and unreadable, swept across the room before settling on Clara. She froze under his gaze. Eli noticed too, straightening defensively. You lost, mister. The man ignored the jab. His voice was calm, even. You Turner. Eli frowned. Yeah, what of it? You put an ad out. Said you were looking for a wife. Eli's eyes narrowed. And if I did? The stranger's gaze shifted to Clara, then back to him. That her? Eli gave a short, derisive laugh. Turns out she ain't cut out for this life. The stranger didn't blink. She came all the way from Missouri. Yeah, fool idea, if you ask me. The stranger's expression hardened. Then she's already tougher than half the men I've known. That trip alone would have broken most. The saloon had gone quiet. A few men leaned forward in interest. Eli scoffed. You wanna take her, be my guest. The man's jaw set. I ain't talking her like she's property. But if you're done throwing her aside, I'll tell you this plain, she's mine now. The room went still. Clara stared at him, breath caught. Eli's face reddened. You got a lot of nerve. Maybe, the stranger said, eyes still steady. But I've also got land, and a house that needs someone with grit enough to start over. She's earned that chance. He turned to Clara, his voice softer now. You got anywhere else to go? She shook her head. Then come with me, he said simply. You don't owe me nothing. Just a chance to prove you're as strong as I think you are. For the first time since stepping off that coach, Clara felt the weight in her chest ease just a little. The humiliation and fear were still there, but under them flickered something else. Hope. The morning broke cold and pale over the Haverly Ranch. Frost clung to the grass in thin silver threads, and a mist hung low across the fields, softening the outlines of the corrals and barns. Clara stood on the porch of the small ranch house, wrapped in one of the thick wool shawls Colt had left for her. She could still see her breath fogging in front of her as she looked out over the land that now stretched, impossibly wide, beneath the growing light. For days, she had been afraid to believe she was truly here, that the man who had stepped forward in the saloon, calm and sure as a mountain, meant what he'd said. That when Colt Haverly told her, you don't owe me nothing, just a chance, he hadn't been speaking out of pity. He'd meant it. He'd said little on the long ride back from Holt Junction, but every word had been weighed, real. He rode beside her, not ahead, slowing his horse when she lagged behind. He'd noticed her silence and never tried to fill it with talk. That quiet strength had unnerved her at first, but as the miles went by, it began to feel like shelter. Now, the wind brushed over the fields, and she drew the shawl tighter, feeling the ache in her arms from the work she'd done since dawn. She had milked the cow, gathered eggs, and swept the hearth, small things, but they grounded her. She was learning the rhythm of this place, the groan of the barn door in the cold, the creak of the windmill, the soft, deep breathing of horses in their stalls. Behind her, the door opened. Colt stepped out, the boards creaking under his boots. He was already dressed for the day, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, coat hanging over one arm. He had that same quiet expression that made it hard to tell what he was thinking. Coffee's on, he said, nodding toward the doorway. You best warm up. Clara turned to him, offering a faint smile. I just wanted to see the sunrise. It's different out here. Feels endless. He looked out over the hills, where the sun was beginning to burn through the fog. Endless'll do that to you, he said. Makes a person realize how small they are, and how much they can take on if they're willin'. She studied him, trying to understand the man who had taken her in without question, without demand. Why did you help me that day? She asked finally. You didn't know me. Colt didn't answer right away. He moved to the edge of the porch, resting one hand on the railing. Didn't have to, he said. I knew the look in your eyes. I've seen it before, in folks who've been turned away too many times. You came all that way hoppin', for a new start, and that man tried to break it before it began. I don't much care for that. His voice was steady, but there was a shadow in it, something she couldn't quite name. Someone did that to you? She asked gently. He smiled a little, though it didn't reach his eyes. Different story, same feelin'. For a while, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was steady, like the heartbeat of the land around them. Then Colt nodded toward the barn. You've done plenty for one mornin'. Rest a bit, I'll finish feedin' the stock. I can help, she said quickly. I want to. He gave her a long, assessing look, the kind that made her straighten her shoulders. Then he nodded once. All right, grab a pair of gloves. Don't want you freezin' your hands off. They walked together toward the barn, boots crunching over the frozen earth. Inside, the air was warm and thick with the scent of hay and horses. Light filtered through the gaps in the wood, striping the floor in gold. She followed Colt's lead, pitching hay, checking the troughs, listening as he explained how the land worked, the herd, the irrigation, the endless repairs that came with winter storms. You ever worked with horses before? He asked, glancing at her as she brushed down a chestnut mare. Not much, she admitted. We had mules for plowing, but I mostly kept house. He grunted softly. You'll learn quick. You've got the kind of hands that don't give up easy. The compliment caught her off guard. No man had ever said that to her before, not as praise. Thank you, she murmured. By midday, her muscles ached, but it was a good ache, earned and honest. When they stopped for lunch, Colt handed her a tin cup of coffee and half a biscuit, and they sat on an overturned barrel outside the barn, watching a pair of hawks wheel in the distance. Eli Turner came by this mornin', Colt said after a long pause. Clara's hand froze around the cup. What did he want? Same thing men like him always want, Colt said, jaw tightening. To prove something. Told me he changed his mind. Said maybe he was too hasty letting you go, and he'd come to fetch you back. Clara's chest tightened. And you told him? I told him to leave my land before he regretted stepping on it, Colt said calmly. Then I told him something else, that if he ever came near you again, he'd answer to me. Her pulse quickened, a mix of shock and fear and something else, a strange warmth that settled deep in her chest. You didn't have to do that. Maybe not, he said, meeting her gaze. But I wanted to. You deserve better than being treated like a transaction. For a long moment, she couldn't look away from him. His gray eyes were steady, his face unreadable, but there was a quiet fire there, something that made her want to believe she could start again after all. The kind of strength that didn't need to shout to be known. She swallowed hard. I don't know what I can give you in return. He shook his head. You already gave it. You stayed. The words sank into her like sunlight breaking through clouds. Around them, the wind moved softly through the grass, the world stretching wide and new. That evening, after the chores were done, Clara stood at the fence watching the last of the daylight fade. The sky was painted in streaks of rose and gold. Behind her, she heard Colt step up quietly. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, she said, You said back in Holt Junction that I was yours. Did you mean that? He hesitated, then nodded. I did, not because I wanted to own you, Clara. Because I saw something in you that matched what's in me, someone who don't break easy, no matter how rough the wind blows. Her throat tightened. And what if I told you I want to stay, not because I owe you, but because I want to? Colt's eyes softened, and he took a slow breath. Then I'd say the ranch just got itself a heart. The sun slipped below the ridge, painting the land in amber shadow. For the first time in years, Clara felt the ache of loneliness lift, replaced by something sturdier, a quiet, growing sense that she belonged.